Okay, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you, Tao Yue, to this webinar for our non-licensees. As you know, I have read your first novel, and we talked a lot about it, and I'm very excited that you followed up, and that you wrote a second novel, and that you're now sharing with us your experiences about in writing this novel, and also in managing the translations, how you learned more about your own culture, about yourself, and about being in between two countries. Tao, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ursula. My pleasure to be here and to host this webinar today. And actually, it's the second time of this year. Last time was 2 weeks ago. It's quite close to each other. So this time is it's the first webinar by IRC to non-licensees, if I'm not mistaken, Ursula. So you are the lucky bunch. Usually you have to join the kind of exclusive club to be entitled to join this kind of webinar, but now we just want to open it to everyone. So we think this kind of topic of novel writing, literature, fiction, how to use it to understand the cultures, to improve your intercultural competencies. And this topic actually is suitable for everyone. You don't have to be the licensee. I think there are a lot of people also, we got feedback from our last webinar, have a lot of great interest. People talk about this a lot. Later, we also had some little discussion on LinkedIn. So we want to open it to everyone. And thank you all for joining today. I think now I'm going to share my screen with the slides. So I will walk you through with the slides, but of course, I will also tell you a bit how my experience of writing fiction and how I learned from it in terms of intercultural competencies. And in the middle, I think we'll give people some time to interact. And also towards the end, if you have any questions, you can just ask. If you don't feel like to ask, you can also type. If any question pop up in your mind and it's not the right moment, you can type in the chat, then we can take it over later. Actually, this is our first webinar. I mentioned it's the second webinar in 2020, but it's the first webinar in the year of the rat. As you know, it's a Chinese New Year, just started a few days ago, which didn't start very well with all this, the virus, everything. But we hope the better things will follow. I will tell you about myself in a little while. Yeah, who am I? Who am I? I think for all of you who received this webinar announcement, you must already know something about me, Tao Yue, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my background and why I want to give this webinar. So as you can see, I'm Chinese. I have been living in the Netherlands for nearly 20 years. So I'm originally from Shanghai. Was born and grew up there until I came to Amsterdam to study social science for my master program. And one thing led to another, and I stayed here for so long, and I didn't expect so. But in my environment, as many people, living in Amsterdam, Amsterdam is very international environment from my student time till now. And most of my life friends, majority of my friends are internationals, expats, and also people come and go. In this way, I also identified myself as those kind of generations or those group of people living in between cultures. My husband is from San Francisco, and we have our son who's a third culture kid. So all this way make me feel like I'm living in a bubble. I used to think that's really good thing because I can see things from different perspectives, but sometimes I also feel it's a limitation because you can never really sink in to a native culture that well. So this is an undertone on all my books. And if you are interested in living across different cultures, how to get to the root to the people, how people think, and how to keep a distance and observe the people, you might be interested in the books I'm writing and in the themes I'm talking about. We can discuss some more about this theme later. And I'm a slasher, not just in terms of my identity, but also in terms of what I do. I'm a business storyteller, so I work in Rotterdam School of Management doing business cases. At the same time, I'm also intercultural trainer. I have been working with Ursula for a long time and on giving training and coaching and some projects related to Chinese culture. And in my free time, my hobby is fiction writing. So I published a couple of books. I can also call myself a fiction writer, so I'm a slasher. With all these things, and seemingly very much disconnected. It seems like I'm very busy to do all kinds of different things and here and there. But I got this question a lot of times, how did you get a time to do all different things? But actually for me, I don't see they are different things. I see myself doing one thing. I found a synergy in all these different activities. The only thing I do is to use narratives to connect cultures. So no matter it's a story about a company, about a business life to be used in education, or it's an interculture, the story about how people feel and think, how they communicate across cultures, or it's a story about a fictional world which I created myself in a parallel universe. I'm doing the only one thing, using narrative to connect cultures. The culture can mean organizational culture, can also mean national culture, can also mean individual culture, like also gender culture, can be different cultures. One of my favorite writers, Joan Didion, said, she has a very famous line, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. What she means is we all grew up in a time, actually it's already from way back, we exposed to different informations and we get fragments of informations. But from very early on in our childhood, we learned to connect these bits of pieces of information, what we observe, what we were told, and using our own logic, using our own underlying assumptions to make sense of different things. So beneath every culture, you have your basic assumption, your hypothesis, your explanation. Everyone's explanation hypothesis may be different because you are from a different environment and you make sense of the same information differently. So this is what I'm interested in, telling about culture and using narratives to help understand the culture, not just for myself, to understand the Dutch culture, Chinese culture, and other cultures, but also to help others.
Yeah, it also reminds me of a definition of culture which is linked to this. Culture is the stuff between people who share stories.
Yeah. The story,
so it's...
Right, yeah. The stories, of course, we can learn a lot from non-fictional books and from those analyses from facts. Facts, of course, are very, very important, but how to interpret the facts, different people have different ways. It doesn't mean all the interpretation is equally right, but in order to understand people's logic, their feeling, their understanding, we have to get into their stories. I think it's the same thing as Ursula was saying. Yeah. Okay, so I'm driven by this very deep interest in narratives, stories, and culture, and I wrote a couple of books. Actually, here is the cover of 3 books. They're actually one book. It was originally published in Chinese in 2012. It's called Red Cricket in Chinese, and later was translated into Shanghai Blue to English and Dutch Schemering both in Shanghai. And the Dutch book is already the 2nd edition. And they are still online, I think. The English one doesn't have many copies anymore, but we are going to still have the project to relaunch it somewhere this year or next year. So this is my first novel, Red Cricket. And then I wrote a second novel, A Slight Difference. it was written, published last year in China. So now it's in the process of being translated into Dutch. Let me just tell you briefly what these two books are about. Since if I don't tell you, people will still ask what it's about. So this first book, Red Cricket, is about a Chinese young woman, professional woman. She has been living and working in the Netherlands for 10 years, and she got her life hit a glass ceiling. And her personal life, she's also single, couldn't find a right man and a family to settle down, and the career hit a glass ceiling. So she decided to go back to China to start a new life. And the life turned out to be quite well, very exciting, but she slowly discovered all the people she knew around her from her childhood behaved very strangely, those neighbors and the families and the childhood friends. And she wondered why. She felt a disconnect with the past. And then she started to dig into this. She thought it must have something to do with her childhood, from the rumor that she was adopted. She never knew who her real parents were. So it concerns her own kind of identity. And then she started to do some digging, finding information, and went all the way, even encountered some dangerous things and people, crazy people. And eventually she got her own explanation who she is and where she's from. But at the end of the page, and she discovered her own explanation, interpretation was completely wrong. So there's a cliffhanger at the end. The second book picked up from the end of the first book is a sequel. So the ending of the first book was quite shocking, left her in kind of trauma. So in order to escape the trauma, she left China and quickly married a Dutch guy she met not for long, and got pregnant and came to the Netherlands to give birth and start a family. She just wanted the peace and the quiet. But of course, in a novel, you have to have drama, and the peace and quiet never sustained. And then she came here during the financial crisis, and she couldn't find a job. And she had a very bad relation with the in-laws because of the clash of the values and the norms and understanding of things. So she ended up to be a single mother in debt and have to survive. Not just survive financially, but also survive in order to earn the respect, dignity for herself as a single mother with a child. And the people didn't, she felt she kind of lacked the respect. And at the same time, she has to keep her big secret, which she discovered in the end of the first book. So it's a kind of double struggle. On the one hand, a struggle to have recognition and to have a job to financially to survive. On the other hand, to survive, to hide her big trauma, not to be discovered, because it will have a huge, unbearable consequence. So this is the second book. So in both books, as you can see, lots of people ask me, is it autobiographic? Is it you? It's kind of like a question the writer always try to avoid, because every book is you, but every book is not. It's fiction, of course. It's a fiction. The stories is not true. But in a way, something is true, because both of the books deal with who I am. The who I am stories about cultural alienation, adaptation, and the self-identity. So this feel and the subject you want to explore, this is real. The reason behind that, or the mood, is real. And these two books, as you can see already, or in different languages. The first book, the second is in the process having different languages. During these projects, I call translation projects because in a way it's more demanding than writing itself. Writing is just you, yourself, and you sit on a desk, you do some research, talking to people, and you make up your own world. But once the book is published, you have to go into the real world to work with different people in translation, at least the publisher and your translator. and some marketing people, and it's a real project. But within this project, and I encountered a lot of interesting things which I didn't imagine before. For example, the title of the book. You can see in the first book, The Red Cricket in Chinese, and the Dutch title, Schemeringboven Shanghai, and the English title, Shanghai Blue. They are very, very different. You know why they are so different? And there's a lot of arguments involved. The Chinese book makes perfect sense. The Red Cricket is referred many times in the book itself. And the cricket itself is something all the Chinese people know, at least my generation. And the people a little younger, they also know. It's a common entertainment, the cricket fighting, the little insect. People use it to, like a little sports, people bet on that, like in a casino, but it's very much a street corner entertainment. Everyone knows about it. So it has a connotation, it has a folk background there. But in a Western world, people wouldn't know about it. So the publisher said that the cricket, even though it's really relevant, but it wouldn't work. So we have to think what if for Dutch title and English title, they insist on using Shanghai, but it's a city people know which can sell. So we have to build Shanghai. There's a lot of discussion about title. It's about translation. Translation have to do with the people's, the knowledge structure, the background knowledge. So it's about culture. And then the narrative style. If you read a book, the English, compare the English and Chinese one, you will know the English has an additional chapter, prologue in the beginning, because I got a feedback from some reviewers said you get into your story too slowly. You use a very Chinese narrative, which is long winding road. You build up, slowly introduce, bring in people to the story, which is very natural. But in the English book, people want to see in the first couple of pages already, what's this book about? And what's the hook? So I have to introduce a prologue, immediately dragging the hook, get people interested so they won't get lost. They won't wait till 20 pages and find where the hook. And the character, is it too many character or too few? Chinese books usually have a big cast, and which the Dutch European readers especially are not very comfortable with. And they are more like a smaller cast and get really in depth of the people's heart. And there are many different things and we can name. There are so many, I'm not going to explain one by one. I just want to say The Lost in Translation, which the movie I really like. I think many of you also seen this movie. It's really manifest itself in the translation projects I did with different people. And for me, through this the translation projects, as well as through the writing, the process itself, it's a kind of a self-growth and a rediscovery, which also I didn't expect before. When I first write the book, my motivation was just, it's for fun, you know, to give myself something to do in my free time, and also because I always enjoy writing. People who liked writing always have the ambition or dream to write a real long novel, a real novel. So there's one day I just encouraged by some American writers, some family friends from New York, and then they gave me the idea, just saying, okay, as long as you're persistent, you know, you have a good story, just write down, no matter what, just write down. So I write whatever on my head down on paper, in my computer, and I shared with friends, I get feedback and rewrote it, half of the book, and I get the book out.
There is now also research that we've been conducting, and we've just submitted the article on third culture kids. You mentioned that already, that your little boy is also a third culture kid, Tao, and their sense of belonging and identity. It's mainly research based on interviews by Monica de Waal, who's also certified for the readiness check. But she's also used the data from the readiness check for some additional analyses. So and I also got intrigued by this question about a sense of belonging and home and identities in reading that. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying when I started to write, I just started as a kind of hobby, passing time. I didn't expect or didn't know what it will bring to me. But within the long process of writing, rewriting, and connect to different people, and also getting into different projects, and let me understand myself better, because it used to kind of force me to reflect on who I am. And also writing, or you say culture, is a mirror. By really study it, and then you kind of like stare yourself in the mirror, and then you notice, oh, a lot of things you didn't know before, how thoroughly Chinese I am. Lots of assumptions I have. Actually, it's very Chinese. Without this comparison, I wouldn't know this, or without being forced to reflect on myself on this, and I wouldn't have known this either. So I say the longer I'm away, the more Chinese I feel, but doesn't mean when I'm in China, I'm identified with everyone. And this is just a sense of self-identification. And as for writing, and the writing has a great value because it gives you the distance. I always think Agatha was also saying she wants to write a book about Polish and French. And why we wanted to write a book one way in another culture, because you have distance. And very often also when we write a book, it's very often it's easier or it's more moving when you write something relate to your youth, to your childhood, those coming of age books, because also we have a culture. Once we have distance. Once you have a distance, and then you start to reflect. Writing need observation, disengagement, and the reflection. And all these things you need a distance. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to create a story that has a thoroughly thought through message. Maybe it's not a good way, the interpretation, the explanation of your understanding. I think this is, I don't know if I made myself clear, because you need some time, some space to allow yourself to sink in, to analyze, to understand what's really going on around there, and then to have an emotional connection. And this is the basic requirement of writing a good book. The second part, I want to move on to not just talking about myself, but also about what I have learned in writing. Through all those processes, I think what I went through, all those things, what I've learned, all those things, can also be used for intercultural training. Using fiction for intercultural training and coaching is not something new. I know a lot of trainers already using that. Movies, short stories, to get people get to know another culture. But so far, I notice a lot of those fiction still stay on the level of introducing people to another culture, or to people living in different culture, directly address the cross-culture issues. For example, if you want to train people about Chinese culture, you may there are a lot of movies about the Chinese people living in the United States. There are a couple of famous movies about that. But I think it's not enough. And sometimes it's better to use the local books, because culture training have 3 levels. If you want to make a book or a movie effective in intercultural training, you have to satisfy all the 3 levels, not just one. The first level is informative. So no matter what you watch the movie, you read a book, no matter the book is good or bad, you have to learn something about the context. So culture has context. You have to know something about how the Dutch history and how what the people live, and what the society is like. And the second is emotional level. You have to feel the empathy with the people there, the role, the characters in the story, feel connected. But the third, most important, is the rational level, to understand why they do some things and how they do things, to have explanation, the causal effect. Only all the three levels you're satisfied, the material is good, useful for the intercultural training. Otherwise, if you only satisfy the informational level, can be quite shallow. And empathy is important, but I found this overemphasized, overused word. Empathy, you can also empathize with the people on the individual, very, very basic human level. This is very nice, but you may ignore the cultural differences. And only you connect this with the rational analytical level, and then this picture is complete. This have nothing to do with the literature, the movie is good or bad. Sometimes a less good movie can be a more effective intercultural material. I will show you. This one, The Last Emperor, is one of my favorite movies about China, by Bertolucci. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen this, have watched this. And I love this movie. It's so beautiful. And it's the color, the tone, and the acting, the cinematography, artistically, it's really, really brilliant. I watched this movie many times. But I wouldn't use that for intercultural training. And why's that? This book gives a lot of information, but very much is from the director's perspective. He chooses certain things which he think can make very good sense to have artistic highlights of what he wants to express. So the camera angle and the color he chooses, sometimes you will say, if compared to historical facts, can mislead people or distort it. So on the informational level, even though it have a lot of information, but a lot of information is not factual, can be misleading to people who want to really understand what happened and the facts. And also the empathetical level is great. And the rational level, because the information can be misleading, the rational level can also be distorted. And this movie, I don't know how many of you have seen. It's on Netflix. It's called The Wandering Earth. It's last year. It's a blockbuster Chinese movie. It's a disaster, the end of the world, a sci-fi movie. I would say it's a B movie. It's not really bad, but it's not great either. Just kind of B, second-rate Hollywood movies. Chinese copy of Hollywood, the end of the world, a disaster movie. I wouldn't recommend it from artistic point of view, but I would use it for intercultural training. It's also have English subtitle. Why is that? It's really Chinese. The story itself is very understandable. Everyone wouldn't know what will happen when the Earth cannot sustain itself, have to hit a meteor or something. People have to escape. But the Hollywood movie, usually you have seen lots of movies, people have to escape from the Earth to go to like colonize Mars or go to some other planets in order to start a new society, new culture there. But the Chinese movie, what they do is they take the Earth with them. So we never leave our home. The scientists, drag the Earth, throw the Earth into the orbit of another orbit in the space. And this assumption itself, we're not talking about the details of the movie, the assumption itself, we cannot live in our home. This is our home. No matter what, we don't abandon our home. So we think of another way, we take our home with us into the universe. This is already quite Chinese, the basic assumption. And lots of details. If you are interested, if at time we can explore this later. Lots of details also. It's you can see the different levels, the information, the emotional and the rational, especially rational, different explanations. Very different from a Western perspective. And then a step further, we were talking about using fiction as an intercultural exercise. And actually fiction writing can also be used as an intercultural exercise. Went through all the process myself. But I think this can also be used in classroom, in intercultural training, or in one-on-one or group coaching. We can just replicate what I have been going through, but in a smaller scale. First of all, I have this example format. Haven't used that, but I think if anyone is interested, and we can exchange ideas how to use this as a pilot. I want to use this as a pilot first to see if it works or not. Like you have a different trainees, you compare them to people from different cultures and let them tell each other stories. Of course, I will give them guidelines, what kind of stories is suitable for telling. You have needed to have a story arc, have some kind of hook, telling each other stories. And then one person write a story about the partners, tells him or her. So from using first person, from the other person's point of view. So this forced the person who writes the story, first of all, to do some research, to interview people, to do some desk research about the other culture, to give enough context, to give enough information. And then second of all, because it's first person, you have to identify emotionally with the person who told your stories. Of course, you have to explain his point of view or her point of view to make everything sensible. And then afterwards, the partner can review the story and get feedback. And then maybe you can also use the general public to review the story and get the feedback to see how people receive this, if they understand if this is realistic or not. And it doesn't have to be a good story, doesn't have to be long, even like 2 pages, even doesn't have an ending. The purpose is not to train everyone to be a good writer, but to give people the opportunity to go through the process and force them to do some exercise maybe usually they will never do in their everyday life, and force them to study, to research, and to reflect. I'm very curious. If I have my pilot result, I will share with you. They are saying by Tolstoy, all great literature is one of the 2 stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. That means all stories, no matter what stories, can have only 2 plots. One is a person to go in some strange world, encounter misunderstanding or some kind of a clash. So it's interculture. And can also mean another type of story is a stranger come to town. You live in your own life, very familiar life, and the people's behavior very predictable. You understand all the people around you, but suddenly someone comes to your familiar environment and you are lost. All the people get lost. You don't know how to read that person. So these are the 2 different stories. Doesn't have to be a real town, a real journey. Yeah, Ursula, you want to say?
Yeah, I just remember this Netflix series Lillehammer. I don't know whether anybody has heard of it, and it's exactly this: a stranger comes to town. It's Janneke, have you seen it? It's a mafia guy from New York who goes into the witness protection program, and they ask him, where do you want to go to? And he has seen the Olympic Games in Lillehammer, and he thought that would be a cool place. And so he goes there, and it's really, in the end, I won't be, the spoiler, but it's a fantastic contrast between this worldly New York mafia guy to this very peaceful, calm, cooperative little community, and what happens then. So I was thinking of that. I love this quote.
Yeah, how to spell the name? Lillehammer.
Lillehammer. It's a Norwegian place. Lillehammer.
Okay, I will look it up.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah, also, I love this quote. It shows very well that all literature essentially is about cross-culture. It's a broad sense of culture, not just national culture. So fiction writing is about translating cultures and relate to others. And of course, the writing is like this, translation, let alone, is about translating cultures. And translation even is more difficult than writing because you need to use another language to make sense for the readers in another culture what it is book's about. And I happen to have a really good Dutch translator. She studied Chinese in Leiden, and we got along very well because we can discuss, communicate a lot of things on a very deeper level. And I really trusted her to rewrite my novel. And for my this new Dutch book, Op in Hanar, I told you it's being translated. But we're also, at the same time, the publisher, the translator, and I, we launched a little project on Kickstarter called A Chinese Dutch Life in order to raise the awareness of how difficult and how important the translation is to intercultural understanding. Of course, also to get some funds to help with this translation project to make it complete. But this Kickstarter campaign is going to end very soon. I think at the end of this week. You can order pre-sale copy of this Dutch book. But if you happen to get on the Kickstarter after the end, after, I think you still have 2 days left probably, but you can still go to my website, my personal website, click on the page of the title, and you can get a link to the pre-order copy. We're also looking for some sponsor for the translation, not just for this one, and also for potentially for the English translation. If anyone who are interested, or anyone who wants to sponsor the translation, depending on the amount, we can have a page dedicated to you or your organization. And that has to be something preferably related to cross-culture. And you will also have a chance to present your organization at the 2020 Frankfurt Book Fair. We can discuss how to co-organize, co-create an event at the, we already booked the place, booked the space in the book fair. And it's a good opportunity to organize something together as a co-sponsor. Yeah. And I think Ursula would also like to show something about the upcoming projects of yours. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. As you know, we are working with, Tao and I, we both work with the Intercultural Readiness Check. We have a whole group of people around the world, more than 600, who are certified to work with this intercultural assessment tool. And it's a questionnaire that people can complete, and they get extensive, in-depth feedback on 4 intercultural competencies. The classic ones, intercultural sensitivity and communication, but also building commitment, how you work in teams, how you get everybody on board, and how do you deal with the uncertainty. So 4 vital competencies, and we've been working with the tool for many years now. Do contact us after the webinar if you want more information. We have also always certification programs. Next week, the first one on location will start, as you see, in Amsterdam. Then we have Frankfurt, again, Amsterdam and Brussels, as we see a trend in Belgium coming up. And then we also have online courses, for those of you who don't want to get on a plane anymore. We have 3 online versions, and the next one is starting already on the 4th of February. And we still have some slots available. So if this is of interest to you, do get in touch, and we can advise you on what's best for you. Yeah. Okay, so much for readiness.
Yeah, I can say, and to vouch you, I'm one of the licensees, very earlier one. I'm licensed a long time ago. And what I think the benefits of it is not just the get the license to operate, but also the network. Every year, IBI organizes a licensee get-together, an offline event. And it's a great network, and it's expanding and expanding. And if you really want to get into this intercultural training or coaching business network, it's a really great opportunity to get to know many people from different parts of the world and to help each other.
Yeah. Thank you, Tao, for that additional information. Thanks very much for your interest. if you have any questions, hang on for a moment and we can look at them. But anybody who needs kind of like do some other stuff right now, thanks very much for joining, and hope to see you again at one of our other webinars. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.